Welcome, everybody. I am Claudia Taylor with the UNT Alumni Association, and welcome to UNT Alumni Live. If you're anything like me, right before you joined this webinar, you were listening to something on Spotify. That's because it's the most popular music streaming service in the world with more than 320 million monthly users. Today, we're going to get a behind-the-scenes look inside the audio giant with UNT alumna Dustee Jenkins, Spotify's head of global communications. From launching new podcasts to handling PR crises, Dustee has a role in communications decisions on a worldwide scale, and we'll chat with her about how she got her start right here at North Texas. Before we get started, just a few reminders. If you're joining us on Zoom, please keep an eye on the chat at the bottom of your screen. I'll be posting some useful links there, and you can also use that to send me your questions for Dustee. I'll also post a link for a survey there. As always, fill that out and you'll be entered to win a UNT prize pack. If you're watching on Facebook, you can leave us your questions in the comments section there too, and we'll get to as many as we can. Now, before I hand the program over to my colleague, Casey Kameninski, let me tell you a little bit about our guest today, Dustee Jenkins. After graduating from UNT in 2001 with a degree in broadcast news, Dustee spent time working in politics before accepting a director position with Public Strategies, Inc., specializing in crisis and financial transactions. She moved on to become Senior Vice President and Chief Communications Officer at Target, where she helped lead the company through high-profile challenges and oversaw hugely popular partnerships with designer brands, including Missoni and Lilly Pulitzer, as well as the launch of the multi-billion-dollar brand Cat & Jack. In her role at Spotify, Dustee leads all external communications, public affairs, and media relations. She also played a key role in guiding the company through its public listing on the New York Stock Exchange and manages internal communications across Spotify's 92 markets worldwide. Now, originally we had hoped to have a tour of Spotify's office in New York City, but due to COVID and security restrictions, we had to move away from that plan last week. So today we are joining Dustee at her home office in New York City. Dustee, thank you for being here, and Casey, take it away.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you, Claudia, and thank you, Dustee, for joining us. This is such a treat to have you.
I'm delighted to be here, and I get to talk Texan with some friends from Texas. This is very exciting for me.
As it is for us. So we're just going to jump right in. I know that you've got a remarkable story and so many great things to talk about. So I just want to start at the beginning of your journey. Where did you grow up? What brought you to UNT? Dustee, how did we get so lucky?
Oh, that's so kind. So Casey, we were talking about this as we were setting up in the pre-tape. I am from a tiny town that most of you have probably not heard of, even though it sits right in Texas, and it's called Andrews. So kind of north of Midland, Odessa. So if you've heard of Andrews, I would love to get a shout out in the chat. I'm very proud of my hometown. Andrews is known for oil and gas and football, and really those things in that order. So growing up there, it is a town of, I think there are 4 or 5 stoplights. Maybe they have 6 these days. I have been gone a long time. But essentially, I knew everyone in my community. I had an incredible community, a wonderful, incredible, special upbringing where I knew my neighbors, lots of people in town rooted for me. And growing up there, I loved the news. I loved getting the local paper, and it only came out twice a week. I remember poring over it with my parents who were really involved in the community. And I remember that as a really special time. And so I was always really drawn to news. And so I looked at each university across Texas and really sought out North Texas because it's exceptional broadcast journalism program. And was thrilled when I came to campus to just have an amazing college experience. And so from the very beginning, I was fortunate enough to have a really special group of friends. And I also had a great group of supporters in the university team. And so Dr. Norval Pohl, who was the president of the university and has since passed, was a very close friend of mine and a wonderful advocate to me. Dr. Elizabeth With, who is still involved at North Texas today, was probably one of my closest friends while I was on campus. And I was just so fortunate that all these people welcomed me and supported me in my student journey.
That's really fantastic. And it's always special to, number one, give a shout out to your hometown. In fact, Shana Russo, pardon me if I just butchered your name, Shana, I'm so sorry. But she said her grandma is from Andrews. So
Nice.
Small world.
We know one another, or at least My family probably knows that family. It is that small of a town.
And we're being told that Andrews used to have a prairie dog town. Is this
This
true?
is true. I remember as a child, you would go sit around this dirt square in the middle of town. It is truly a square roped off, just a big dirt mound, and we would watch the prairie dogs pop around. I mean, it's great entertainment.
Hey, it's good, clean fun. What's not to love? I appreciate that. All right. So it sounds like you've stayed really well connected to the university since graduation. What's inspired you to do that? And what's motivated you to do that?
Casey, when I came to the university, I was keenly aware that some students, and I get everyone has a different experience, but some students really wanted to commute in and attend class and then go home. I was coming from a town 6 hours away. And so not only did I need to remain on campus, but I also was coming to have the full on experience. And I think, like anything, college is what you want to make of it. And so I decided to really lean in with all that I had into the college experience. And so I had really incredible friends. I joined a sorority. I got super involved on campus. I got involved with the Student Government Association. I worked on the NT40, which does a lot of ambassador work on behalf of the university. And so with each of those experiences, I had a chance to grow my base of friends, to learn a lot about different people and facets of the university. And I will tell you, like, that's been so instrumental in shaping sort of who I am today. I'll tell the chat a funny story that the chief of staff for the senator that I work for would also probably tell you from a different perspective. But when I decided that I wanted to go to Washington, D.C., I wanted to go work on Capitol Hill. And 9/11 had just happened, and we were in the middle of the Ricin scare. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but there had been a series of incidents on Capitol Hill that have forced the buildings to shut down due to really domestic terrorism. And so as we were in the middle of this event, I decided I want to go to Washington, D.C. I want to work in politics. I want to be a part of shaping where our country is going to go, because these are dark times. And so my parents were terrified, I mean, utterly terrified that I was going to move out there and do this. And so I turned to a lot of the university, my friends, Dr. Pohl, Dr. Whiff, for counsel. And I just really needed someone to tell me, you can do this. Like, being a part of this has the potential to be special and unforgettable. And yes, there is risk, like there is in anything in the world, but this could forever shape you. And so that notion of, like, keep going, because I had so much fun on campus, I just wanted to stay. And Dr. Pohl was like, you got to go out there and explore. And if you choose to come back, come back. But first, like, go see and go get some experiences. And it was really wonderful advice, and it stayed with me. But so when I was interviewing for this job, I had heard that these jobs would be really competitive. And so I went to Dr. Cox, who was a professor on campus. I went to the state representative, who was an alum of North Texas, had been very involved while I was on campus. I went to Dr. Pohl, I went to Dr. Whiff, and I asked them each to write me a letter of recommendation. And so I'm interviewing for this job, and I have this notebook full of letters of recommendation. I had 14 letters. And so the chief of staff is looking at me, and we're sitting on the steps because the building is closed for Ricin. My parents are sitting in the car, probably crying their eyes out. And he looks at me and he said, Dustee, you do know that this job is for answering the phone, right? And I said, yes, but as all of these letters of recommendation tell you, I'm going to be really good at answering the phone.
You're going to be the best.
And truly, like, that foot in the door, it forever changed my trajectory. And so I think that that's another thing that North Texas instilled in me, is, like, see beyond where you sit. There's so much opportunity. There's so much potential. Don't limit yourself. And so by going at it full force and by showing that much enthusiasm for a job of literally answering the phone, I ultimately became her press secretary. But I wouldn't have gotten to the press secretary if I didn't get a foot in the door in the first place. And so I'll always be grateful to UNT for that and so many other reasons.
Dustee, there's so much you just talked about that is so fantastic and phenomenal, and so many great takeaways for our current freshman students, and even, our high school students or parents of high school students that may be considering going to college after they graduate. And whatever their path may lead them down, it doesn't matter. You talked about just leaning in and being resilient and being tenacious. And the one thing that really stood out to me personally was you talked about getting to know your professors and getting to know the faculty. And so many times I feel like students are very timid and intimidated by the faculty and staff. And I'm here to tell you too, as an alum, that there's no reason to be that way, right? I mean, so many great people on campus. And so I love that you have those precious memories and you still think about it to this day. In fact, it's like everybody is in our head right now because so many great relevant questions are rolling in. And one of them talking about being a freshman and getting your foot in the door. And with things changing in our world right now, what advice can you offer for a student that is about to graduate and trying to start the career and working through a pandemic? How can you stand out in a crowd on a screen?
It's a great question. It is not an easy time for anyone. You even talk to the most famous artists, the most talented podcasters, the most well-known celebrities in the world, and everyone is having to adapt to this environment. Our CEO is having to adapt to this environment. And so at Spotify, I have a unique lens in that my team is really global. And so I have a team that sits in Dubai and a person in Paris and a couple of people in Berlin and 5 people in Stockholm. And I've got people in Singapore. And so really all over the world. Spotify is in 92 markets around the world. And so when we talk each day, we do a morning huddle where we're talking about sort of what's going on in our lives. And usually there are things that are unique to each of us based on where we sit in the world. So for example, our team in Asia, they're headed to bed at that time. For Japan, they're staying up, it's the middle of the night. For Australia, they're headed to bed, or it's the middle of the night, they're getting on for this call. And so we're all at different places and phases in our life. But when COVID happened, it happened to everyone everywhere in the world. Like it was this gigantic stop sign for everyone. And we all have felt it. And for some of us, there have been long lingering effects. And so the reality is everyone has been disadvantaged. And so what you have to remember is you're starting at the same place as everyone else. Everyone's trying to figure out, how do I stand out? How do I stand up? How do I shine in this moment? So part of it is leaning into that experience. So on my team, we've hired, I think 8 or 9 people in the middle of the pandemic. We've had to onboard them virtually. We haven't met most of them in person ever. I don't know that we will anytime soon. And so part of it is like ensuring that you're following up, ensuring that you're putting yourself forward, ensuring that you're being consistent, ensuring that you're being present with your leaders at work. So for those that are in the workforce, touching base with your leader, letting them know that you're there, showing up to my morning huddle and adding value, giving input to what we're doing. And so like anything, if you want to sit back and life happen to you, forward, get into it, make your presence known. My grandmother gave me a piece of advice: always let them know you're there. And I think that that's so right. Oftentimes graduated from the top school, or maybe the person who has the most accolades or awards, but it's the person who's going to work the hardest and who wants it the most. And I feel that by how.
So what have been some of the most impressive ways you've seen maybe some of these new team members show up?
Yeah, so, a lot of different happy hours. They've set up virtual coffees, especially given different time zones. They've made an effort to understand the inner workings of the business. They've set up get to know yous with other members of the Spotify team that sit outside of PR and communications. They're reading everything that they can on the company. They're watching old presentations and big companies, and they're saying, here's how TikTok is managing this issue right now. Here's what's happening at Twitter today. Here's what's happening at Facebook today. And so that morning huddle that we have is not just about, we know what we're doing. We could talk about ourselves for 30 minutes all day, but it's far more interesting to look outside and see what other companies are doing. What could we emulate? And soak up that experience and share it with one another. And those are the employees that are really stepping up and shining, I would say, in this moment.
And seeing what's happening in the world around them and adapting to that. But also you mentioned building those relationships, even though we are so alienated and isolated right now and have been, it sounds like your team is really making relationships a priority. And I think that that's really fantastic because we need each other right now. And that's Fantastic. So, lots of questions coming in about internships, as I expected there would be. So, let's talk internships for a second. Let's talk about how many interns do you guys have? How many applicants do you get? What are you looking for in an applicant? And just go from there.
Yes. So this is sort of my most favorite and least favorite question, because it is a hot, demanding topic across Spotify. So just so everyone has the numbers, every year we get over 50,000 applicants for internships. Last year, I believe we got 56,000, and there are 60 spots. And so it is one of those things where it's a global internship program. And so we will have interns in places like Stockholm, Sweden, where the company was founded. And then we will have internships in New York City and in LA. And given that everyone is working in this COVID environment, there are some internships even today where you aren't actually traveling out to our offices. And it will be interesting to see how that might change. But the reality is it's really competitive. And so what we're looking for is, first and foremost, apply and apply on time. And so I will tell you that the deadline is in just about a week. And so if you are interested in this internship and you reach out to me after the fact, which happens often, and lots of well-known famous people will reach out to me after the fact and say, hey, can you help with my niece or friend? And there's nothing I can do if the person didn't apply. And so first and foremost, it's what we talked about. You've got to show up. You've got to put your hand in the air and say you're interested, and you've got to do so on time. And so if you're interested, do apply. And then I would say, like, it does come down to area of interest. And so we are looking for different skills. So if you're an engineer and you're pursuing that area of the business, obviously they're looking for certain skill sets within who they're hiring as an intern. In our case, for communications and marketing, we're looking for people who are hungry, who are up for a challenge, who have an interest in content or music or podcasts. And so there are so many facets of audio today. And so there is an opportunity as you apply online to talk about those things and a bit about your background. And I know, given the radio, TV, film school and the broadcast journalism school is so big at North Texas, there's probably some people there that would be a great fit. So apply.
You heard it, guys. It's not too late. Deadline ends in about a week. So get your 14 letters of recommendation together and get them in. Don't be late. Nobody likes anybody showing up late. Oh my gosh. Sorry, Dustee. I just had to. I think that's so precious. I love that about you. Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's talk about your journey here. So from Target to now Spotify, like, you are living the consumer's dream jobs, right? Cat and Jack, and launching all of these major programs and building these businesses and doing so much and making such an impact. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome, and how did you overcome some of these big obstacles? And you don't have to speak any major details, but just generically, for those that may be in the workforce or facing some obstacles right now, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. And so obviously each experience has been really different. Politics was really different from consulting. Consulting was really different from being in-house at Target and running comms there. And there were great days at Target, the designer collaborations, Missoni, Lily Pulitzer. We did so many, Jason Wu for Target, Prabal Gurung for Target. So we did so many of these really cool designer collabs. And then there were dark days. There was a massive data breach. We laid off 4,000 people. We restructured the company. We had to exit our Canadian business. And so, but I would say across the board, what's really been consistent is I love communications. I love the skill of it. I love the chess match of it. I love that it's unpredictable. I also even like, and it feels crazy, but I wake up in the morning and I don't know what stories are going to come our way or what issues I might have to deal with. And I might think I'm going to have one type of day, and then it all falls apart because there's an issue happening within the business, or we've had to pivot a strategy and we're going to have to communicate that out to our entire global employee base. And so things can change very rapidly. And I like being in the mix of that. I like being part of the team of people who's solving that problem. And my piece is really, how do we present this to the world, or how do we present this to our team? And so when I look at each challenge, I sort of look at it from, like, what can I control? What can't I control? How can I manage this in this moment? How can I instill confidence in the partners sitting across from me? Because when you're faced with difficult things, and every company faces them, it's really daunting. Like it for anyone, especially for like a CEO. I speak to our CEO on a daily basis at Spotify. I really respect him. He respects what I do. We don't always agree, which I think is really healthy. But we go back and forth on a lot of things, and we usually come to a good conclusion. One piece of advice that I give to my team a lot that I would share with all of you is, when you think about a balloon and a string, the balloon will like get worked up and float up. You know, it's floating. And I say to the team all the time, be the string. We just have to pull the balloon back down. We have to help people understand, here's the way forward. Here is how we're going to manage this. Here's step one, here's step two, here's step three. And so I constantly talk to my team when things are spinning, no one looks to the person who's panicking. That person is the person that to me is the most concerning, because they'll make rush judgments. They'll do things that are in response to a moment in time, not the big picture. No one looks to that person to lead them. Everyone looks to the steady, confident person in the room. And so I constantly tell my team, if we want to lead the company in the best and worst of times, we always have to be that person. And so I really try to encourage them to try to be the string.
What a great analogy. I appreciate that. So again, my mind is going a million different ways, and Ryan Brera over here is talking and being Ryan right now. Like I said, I have a friend and he's funny. In fact, he should be in this seat. He's on our Fort Worth or our Tarrant County chapter steering committee. So we work closely together, as he's one of our volunteers. So I'm going to shift to his question right now, because if I don't, I'm going to forget and it's not going to be funny anymore. But I'm just going to read it to you. He says, question for Dustee. What are some of your recent favorite podcasts? My wife especially loves true crime podcasts. I sleep with one eye open. So any new recommendations would be much appreciated.
There are so many good true crime podcasts. And so there was some research recently done. Don't worry, Ryan, it's not just your wife. Lots of women love true crime. I love true crime. And so I can give lots of recommendations, but one that's ours that Spotify helped create and shepherd that recently has come out in the last several months is called The Clearing. And so it's a podcast about a woman who discovers that her father is a serial killer. And so she is sort of on this journey to understand how this happened, how her father fell into this, how she lived with him all these years and missed this entirely. And so I think that one is a really fascinating one. My Favorite Murder is very popular on our platform. We've got several that are popular. I would also look into the Parcast series. And so Parcast really started with just true crime. That's mainly what they do. It's a company Spotify acquired. And they're doing all sorts of paranormal things. They're doing true crime, whodunit kind of stuff. And each episodes are packed in really tight. So I would search for those as well. There are lots of fun ones also that are coming out fairly soon. And then I would just also put a plug in. We just did a podcast with Michelle Obama. That was great if you're looking for content that you can only hear on Spotify. And then I am so excited about this one as a parent. I don't know yet if it's super kid appropriate, so hold on that. But Batman, we just did a partnership with DC Comics at Spotify. And so our first podcast under that franchise is going to be with Batman. So I'm looking forward to that one.
I am so excited for this. And I know Ryan's geeking out right now. He is all about the Batman. So Ryan, look for it, man. All right. Oh my gosh, this is so fun. Of course, people are dying to know what are your favorite playlists and albums? And I know we touched on that briefly at the beginning, but hit the audience again. What is Dustee Jenkins listening to? And what rising artists do we need to keep our eyes on right now?
Yeah, so I'll start first with playlists and albums. So we've been doing throwback playlists that I'm really into. It's just like a great way to go back in time. We're finding in the pandemic, like people are yearning for things that are familiar and things that they know and love. And so like old music, there's something about just like hearing songs where you know all the words and it like takes you back to an easier place and time than the one we're all sitting in. And so we do Throwback Thursday playlists that are specially made for you based on your listening data, based on when you were born. And so I highly encourage, like, leverage. Our algorithms are so good. The playlists that we create are so good, and the people that work on them. So people think about tech and they all automatically think about algorithms, but Spotify takes what's called an algatorial approach. And so we have a team of editors that work on playlists. So there's a person that does the Rap Caviar playlist. His name is Carl Cherry. He knows rap music. He knows the players in the industry. He's listening to new music all the time. And so he's out there scouring. There's one in the country space called Hot Country that I really like. And so that is led by a woman out of Nashville named Brittany Schaefer. And they're always looking for hot country artists. And she's coming to me all the time. And she said, you got to check out this woman named Tennille Town. And Tennille Towns is amazing. If you've not listened to her, that's a recommendation I would throw out there. But I really encourage people to listen to the playlist, because the beauty of Spotify is you can always discover new music. Personal favorite is Mood Booster. I was saying at the beginning of the chat, I like to start my day with it. It's just like a feel-good way to start your day. We've got playlists about driving in the car. We've got road trip playlists. And so really cooking in your kitchen, if you're doing something, we probably have a playlist for it.
I feel like you are reading what is on my screen every time I log into my Spotify account. It's no lie. The throwback jams from Nelly to Nirvana, girl, I love it. So y'all are doing a great job. Thank you for sharing that. So, okay, let's kind of, I just looked at the time, it's 4:30. I do this all the time. I get really excited and then lose track of time. You are a mother of 2 young children. Is that correct?
Yes, I have a 6-year-old daughter named Havana and a 3-year-old named Hutch. And they keep me on my toes.
Yes, they do. I can only imagine. So being a mom with young children in the middle of a pandemic, can you give us some Dustee Jenkins pandemic parenting tips? What have you done to make this normal for the kiddos?
Well, I would say here's tip 1. Drink wine, or in my case, tequila. I like tequila, but it helps to make all of this slightly more manageable. And so I listen, I think for everyone, it's been hard. And so I just remember at the beginning, I was frustrated. My kids were constantly crashing my calls. I felt like I didn't come across as serious as I needed to be. We were also dealing with really significant challenges as a company. And I felt like I wasn't as present as I needed to be. And one day I just got so frustrated and I was like, you know what? I just got to give myself a break. Like I got to give myself a break because this is creating stress for them. And this is also strange for them. And so my kids are keenly aware that something weird is going on. I mean, they wear masks to school every day. We were in New York when the whole thing happened. And for those that followed it, New York really was the epicenter for the United States for quite some time. And it was scary. I mean, it was the early days and no one knew what to expect. And it was really terrifying. And so part of it is just trying to create a little normalcy within our house because so much has been taken away. And so we have dance parties in our kitchen almost every evening. We laugh. We've done a lot of crafts. Some have been cute on Pinterest, but not cute in real life. And so I think part of it is like rolling with it, just like anything, we can't change so much of this. And so I really think it is just managing through. And that's why I would say I go back to my roots. Growing up in West Texas, there was a prairie dog farm and I could go check that out. And there was a playground, but I certainly didn't have access to the museums and the schools and the exciting places in the Broadway theater and the amazing restaurants that my children have access to. And I turned out okay. And so part of it is just reminding myself like, yes, this is strange. And a lot of this magic of New York has been taken away, but my kids are going to be okay. They're going to be okay because their parents are going to be okay. And their family's going to create this loving environment. And that's going to get us all through. And I really believe that. I mean, when my children were born, we put Texas soil under the bed in Minnesota. And this doctor said to me, he was like, hold on a minute. You want to put dirt under the hospital bed in a sterile environment? And I was like, don't worry, I'm going to put it in a container. I'm not like sprinkling it out there. And he said, okay, I think this is fine if it's religious. Is it religious? And I was like, oh yes, being from Texas is a religion. Like if you're not from there, you wouldn't understand, but trust me, it's religious.
Amen.
And so I just think about like this and how my Texas grandmother would have laughed at all of this and the nonsense. And so I'm trying to have a little bit of a sense of humor, even though it's not great for anyone.
I couldn't agree more. Give yourself grace. Drink tequila or wine. The minute you said tequila, I was like, wow, she really is true to her roots. I love that. And Dustee, if you haven't tried it yet, we need to send you a bottle of our North Texas Tempranillo wine that you can order online through the website. We now have our own wine and it is delicious. So
cool.
We'll have to ship some up to you if we can. I don't know what the laws are. I need to be quiet because I don't really know that much. So anyway, that, and one other thing I want to mention that I'm really excited about, because talking about podcasts, sorry, we keep flipping gears here, going back and forth. So many great questions coming in. You can find our Ollie at UNT podcast also on Spotify. So all of our alumni spotlight podcasts, all you have to do is search for Ollie, OLLI at UNT. And you can hear from some of our most distinguished alumni and get their take on their areas of expertise. So I just had to make that little plug. So thank you for
gotta get a plug.
Hey, and also the guys wanted, we just talked true crime for the ladies. So the guys need to know what sports podcast.
So we just acquired at Spotify Bill Simmons' podcast, The Ringer. And so Bill Simmons is a legend. For those of you that haven't followed his career, he's got a really storied past. Started with ESPN, did a lot of the 30 under 30 films that happened, and then ended up breaking off and doing his own thing. And so The Ringer is a really cool set of sports podcasts. They also get into pop culture. And Bill did this fun podcast with us on our podcast that our team produces called For the Record. And he talks about the days that the sports world went quiet and how strange it was and what it's like to listen and watch sports without fans and what it's been like for him, who has covered sports from every single perspective for decades. And, you know, he jokes that the US Open was almost impossible to watch. He says, you know, some sports without the oohs and the ahs and the uhs, it's just really, really hard to sort of mimic the experience. And so that was a fun one that we did, but there are so many sports podcasts on our platform. You know, some are a little for grownups, for adults, and then others are for anyone. And so take your pick, but I really encourage checking out what Bill's up to.
You just made me think about the silence in the stadium and what that must feel like as an athlete and how weird that is. I know it's weird watching it on television and just hearing the sound being piped in and you're like, it's not the same.
It was a cool story. We interviewed a woman who played tennis and she played in the Open, and she talked about it's like when you were a kid and only your parents were in the stands. She said it's so strange, like you'll hear two people clapping. She said it's a very, very different experience.
Oh, I'm so sure. So I'm sure, Dustee, you've got just an extremely long list of celebrities and musicians that you've worked with and met. Who would you say has been one of the most inspirational people that you've got to meet in this role?
Oh, wow. It's such a great question. I have met so many, and I try not to ever take it for granted. And like any people in life, some people are great and some people are not, but every single time I'm sort of pinching myself. I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with President Bush when I worked for him. And he is just genuine and fun and funny and interesting. And I really enjoyed working with him. I found him to be a very empathetic, caring person. I have a close friend, and I'll tell you it's timely. I spoke to him today, and that's Matthew McConaughey and his wife, Camilla. So we talked to them for a chat we're doing at Spotify this week. And so he's got a new book coming out called Green Lights, and it's all about life experiences and hitting those green lights and pausing at red and yellow lights to learn from those experiences. And Matthew and I have been friends for years. His wife and I are quite close. And Matthew McConaughey is exactly what you hope he is. He is just as much fun and just as wonderful and just as interesting and creative as you think he might be from watching him pound his chest on The Wolf of Wall Street.
That is so cool. How did you meet Matthew?
So his wife and I ended up overlapping in fashion, and we saw each other at various events. She was from Texas, I was from Texas. We made the connection. So Texas, look, it's the great connector. And he is, I mean, they're just incredible people. The other thing I would say about them is they're very devoted to their family. And so they're very present as parents. They're very involved in their kids' lives. They're incredible, incredible parents and people. They're tried and true fans of their university. He went to the University of Texas, and he, talks about the importance of rooting for your team in good times and in bad times. And, I think that there's something to be said for that.
Okay. I totally agree. And I cannot wait to get my hands on his book whenever that comes out. So that will be a blast. All right. So you just very casually mentioned the For the Record podcast. And I know that this is an exciting project for you. So you've got to go a little bit more in depth for us. Tell us a little bit more about this and what this project means to you.
So Casey, I so appreciate you letting me get a plug in here. And so for the audience, I would love to know what you think of this. It's hard for me to get feedback sitting in this role, like real genuine feedback from users. And so if you would listen to it on Spotify, I would be so very grateful. It is really called For the Record. So it's a take from my old reporting days of being on the record. And so essentially what this is it's Spotify telling Spotify stories in a way that hopefully does not feel corporate at all, that feels unique and like giving you an inside peek into the company. And so again, going back to when people apply for a job, if someone has applied for a job and they've listened to several podcasts and they come into the interview and they talk about, oh, by the way, on this podcast, I love this. It's like, in addition to Googling me and looking me up on LinkedIn, they actually spent the time to learn about our business. And I think that's so powerful. And so essentially what this is we decided we wanted a podcast to tell our story. We know in this business, in this world, telling your story is so valuable. And we thought, okay, we'll just put this out there. But we're Spotify. And so the audio quality had to be exceptional. The mixing had to be exceptional. The music included had to be exceptional and licensed. And in addition, we knew we needed to interview really amazing people. So we've chatted with Katy Perry. I was able to meet Dolly Parton last week. I wanted to stand up and squeal. I was so excited. She's got a new Christmas album coming out. And so we chatted with her for the podcast. And that one will air a week from now. But we are really trying to tell music's most important stories. And so we just did one on artists who are trying to break out as a star, who are trying to emerge as an artist in a really competitive environment, especially in times of COVID. And sort of what are they doing and how are they being discovered? And that one was all about our Radar Artist program for up and coming artists. And so that's one I would encourage people to listen to. But it has been a whole lot of fun. And Casey, it is so much work. I had no idea how hard it would be. And they take us 2 weeks each time. Like we're right to the wire of publishing, because if you listen, like there's a lot of sound mixing that goes in. We've really tried to do a lot with the audio quality. Just knowing if it's a Spotify podcast, you're going to expect that we're going to have a pretty high bar.
I love that. And it sounds like you're learning a lot along the way as well as you produce this. So that's fantastic. Just to make it very clear though, University of North Texas Alumni Association programmers, Claudia and I, we know nothing about audio quality. So we're sorry guys, maybe we can get some help. If you're out there and can help us, please give us a call. Okay, so Dustee, I don't want to hold you hostage too much longer. It's already 4:45 and I know you have a family to get to. So gosh, what is the biggest question we want to ask you? I don't know. There's like 15 really, but I think more than anything, advice in any level, career, professional, personal, what is one big message that you would like to send our audience today before we let you go?
Yeah. Okay. Let me think. Big advice. And this is probably really simple. And I mentioned this when I did an interview for North Texas. But I mentioned this as I was talking about my university experience, when I was young, my dad really instilled in me this like incredible work ethic and this desire to just always keep going, keep trying, not giving up. And I can't tell you how important I think that is. And for your students, like to keep going. Like I have faced rejection throughout my career. When I was on Capitol Hill, I wanted to go be a press secretary, and I was the senator's deputy press secretary. And a press secretary role opened up for another member of Congress. And I called them up and I didn't get the job and I was devastated. And then the senator lost her press secretary. That press secretary moved on, and I didn't get that job, and I was devastated. And that second person that came in, he lasted for 2 weeks, and then I got the job. And so had I gotten so frustrated that I threw my hands up in the air and just walked away and didn't keep going and didn't keep fighting, I wouldn't have ended up there. And I really look at that first experience, and it was so important in shaping where I am and who I am today. And so that notion of resiliency and being adaptable and just keep going, I really believe, as simple as it is, it's so, so, so important, because each day you can like argue, I don't want to get up. Like, I'm exhausted by this. It's harder than it has to be. Right now, it's depressing out there. It feels really frustrating. And I just think like we all right now, it's like just putting one foot in front of the other. We just have to keep going.
Thank you for that reminder. I think we all need that on a daily basis. So if I can just record this and play it every day while I'm listening to my mood boost playlist, then I'll be set for the day, and every day will be awesome. Okay, one last question before we close, because it comes from a really important person, Mr. Neil Foote, and I appreciate him asking this. And that is, what's next for Spotify? Will you guys be the next Netflix? Are we thinking TV, or is there something else out there that we could look for coming from Spotify?
Hi, Neil. So as far as what's next, Spotify is very ambitious, and Daniel Ek, the CEO, has put it out there. And so just to take a small step back for your audience that might not know, Spotify was born out of Stockholm, Sweden in the days of piracy. And so the music industry had fallen completely apart. Like, we all remember those Napster downloads. And yes, it was hard and it took forever and the sound quality wasn't great, but that's what happened to all of music. Everyone went to these downloads. And so as a result, the industry really fell apart. And Daniel Ek believed, like, in order for people to pay something, it has to be a better user experience. And so we joke at Spotify that the question was, how do you steal from a pirate? Can you steal from a pirate? Because once it's free, can you ever convince someone to pay? And so part of what we had to do was to make it an instant experience, make it a great experience, make the playlist better than ever, curate the experience. And I feel like Spotify has just gotten better and better at that. But Daniel Ek put it out there this last year and did so through communications. And so he came to me in February of last year, and he said, we're going to pivot, and we're going to go all in on audio. And I really need you to help me shape this vision. And so we wrote a piece for our blog. He did a CNBC interview. We talked to the employees, and we really pivoted with the ambition of being the world's biggest audio company. And so when you think about an audio experience, you can do it while you're driving, while you're working out, while you're cooking, while you're taking care of your kids, with your family. And so it doesn't have sort of the negative connotations that maybe something like a screen experience would have. And so people are willing to use audio in a really different way because it is that lean back experience. And so I think what you're going to see us do is really continue to go all in on audio and different forms of audio. So interestingly, we were talking to Matthew McConaughey because he just did a music and talk series for us. And this is brand new. So I would encourage you to check this out. And all you have to do is go look up his playlist. But essentially what he did is he talked between each song, and he talked about why that song was so important to him, how it shaped his life. And so he would tell a story about a moment in time, a death of a friend as an example, like working on a project as an example, and then he'd play the song. And so you're going to see us try lots of different things with audio over the next several years. And I will tell you, I've never been more excited to work at Spotify than I do right now. I mean, it is really this incredible, wonderful, exciting, innovative, fast-paced, fun place. And I just go back to, like, I credit North Texas so much because I learned at North Texas, like, you can do anything. Like, it's all right there at your fingertips. And so it's this belief that, like, go capture it, go try it, go do this thing. And I'll just be forever grateful because that's how I built my confidence. And that's how I'm able to go do this on behalf of Spotify.
Dustee, I couldn't have said it better myself, and I feel like I should send you a check for the promotion. And thank you. It's good to know I'm not the only one that feels that way. And we've always been this under-recognized, understated university up in North Central Texas, and we're doing amazing things I mean, look at you, looking at some of the other people we've been able to interview over the last few months. It's remarkable what we're turning out at UNT. So whether you're a parent or a high school teacher watching, tuning in, a current student, bring your friends, guys. This is where it's at, you know? So Dustee, once again, thank you so much